Okay, before we get started tonight, we have some exciting news. Our app is available in the App Store on iOS and also at Google Play.
That's very cool. So if someone goes to the iTunes Store or Google Play, all they have to do is go to the search bar, right?
Yes.
And type in Astonishing Legends.
That's right, for the apps.
For the apps, yes. That'll show up. Right. Be sure that you're in the app search field.
Yes, on your portable. You're not going to find it on your laptop. It's not a laptop program. It's an iOS program or an Android program, and there's a Windows version right around the corner.
Yeah, so basically for your iPad, your iPhone, or your Android phone, or Google phone.
Yes, your Samsung, whatever. Yeah.
It's all going to be there.
That's right.
And I think it's the easiest way to get the show. If you don't want to get, you don't want to get on the web page and search through things, although that's fun.
Yeah, we do. We put some great links up.
Yeah,
when
so
we post a story.
Got a lot of added material on it, so definitely check that out. But I've heard from people, it's like, well, I just, first of all, I just want to hear the show on my mobile device because that's how I'm gardening, I'm commuting, I'm bicycling. That's how they want to hear it. This is the easiest way to do that.
This is the absolute easiest way, and you can actually reach out to us through this app. It also has support if you have any issues with it. You can favorite episodes and listen to them over and over, which I know that's something that my mom likes to do. And
over and over.
But anyway, it's really cool, and we're pleased with it. And also, it has stunning new artwork from our graphic designer, John Mahorny, who, by the way, if anybody needs a logo designed or any kind of really good graphic work, he is a very talented man, and he is moonlighting all the time. So if you like our logo and you're interested in getting some more stuff done, you should reach out to us, and we'll put you in touch with him.
Yeah, very creative guy, and I must say, he makes the process a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun working with him because he gives you some great sketches. He really gets what you're talking about.
Yes, he does. He has a lot of experience in advertising for years now, and which is where I came from, and that's why I was fortunate to have him as a contact. And I'm really glad that we got set up with him. And so when you download the app, you're going to see some new, really cool artwork that he did for us. We've added some more texture and flavor to our logo, courtesy of him, and we'll be rolling those logos out probably in the podcast itself pretty soon. But anyway, we just want to get that out there. If you don't have the app, if you don't like iTunes, if you get sick of all the hoops you have to jump through to listen to our podcast and a sea of other podcasts, you get our app. It's just about us, and it's right there, and it's easy to find.
Yeah, it updates itself.
That's right.
So you don't have to manually do it. One cool feature that I found is the Contact Us, and I knew that Scott set this up months ago, maybe even a few months before we even started recording. There's a direct secret phone number you can call. It says call the show. And it's like, wait, who's? I'm not answering that, am I? Because I'm not near that.
It actually comes through to my cell phone. It's a Google number.
That's right.
Which I haven't actually tried it, and it's not like our phone's ringing off the hook. But
no, but you could ring it once. I think it goes to a voicemail box, right?
If I don't answer, it'll go to a voicemail box. But it actually does forward through to my cell phone now.
You just opened up a huge.
I did actually. I'm not the one that opened it up. You did.
Well, you don't have to. You can cut all this out because
no, it's all right.
I did find that interesting. Is that there's several ways to contact us. Some folks already have, and we'll be giving them a shout out here as we put their stories into the story folder and follow up on a few of those, and we'll get back to you on that.
That's right. Without any further ado, let's roll the theme. Welcome back to Astonishing Legends. I'm Scott Philbrook, and this is Forrest Burgess.
Ghosts could walk freely tonight without fear of the disbelief of men, for this night was haunted, and it would be an insensitive man who did not know it. John Steinbeck, Tortilla Flat.
I realized that I'd ignored several warnings. That place at that time was not for me.
So this is kind of exciting. Tonight's show is the first show we've done where we're actually interviewing a listener who contacted us with his own story.
Yeah, that's right. There's been other listeners who have contacted us with either a review on iTunes or an email asking us questions about a subject we've covered or suggesting story ideas, which we love, so please keep those coming. But this is the first listener, I believe, that told us that he had a story he wanted to share.
Exactly. And it started out with him actually emailing me a written version of the story.
Yeah, he's a pretty good short story writer.
Yeah, it turns out he's a published author, although he is also a retired emergency room doctor.
Yeah, which makes it fascinating. And I believe for a lot of folks, lends his point of view a little more credibility because, here's a man of science. He's a physician who has seen a lot of, I'm sure, ghastly things come through the doors of the hospital. And it's a no-nonsense job.
That's right. People always say when they talk about UFOs that if it's an airline pilot or an astronaut or a cop, a policeman, then the story is more believable.
Exactly. That's my point.
And I don't know whether it's true or not, but in this case, this story, the fact that it is coming from someone who was an emergency room doctor, for me, does make it more believable. This is, as you say, a man of science.
Yes, he studied science. But not only that, I think, at least with all the doctors I've come across, there's a logical explanation for most things that are wrong with you. You might be feeling strange, but, it's the medication you're taking or it's these environmental symptoms. So when you hear a doctor who's been a doctor for quite a long time now, and I believe is retired, right?
That's correct.
When he says this happened to him, I don't know, I tend to believe him a little bit more.
Yes, I do too. So with that, we're going to play the interview. When it's over, we'll come back and give you our point of view on the story. Hey, Rick, this is Scott Philbrook calling. I was wondering if you're home.
Hey, hello.
Hey, how are you?
Good. Man, talk about precise.
Yeah, I'm usually punctual. If I'm not, it means I'm having a tech issue.
Cool. Well, it's raining as advertised, but we haven't had any thunder yet, so.
Oh, that's good. And it occurred to me that I'm calling you on Cinco de Mayo. Hope you didn't have any plans.
Well, I'll set off the fireworks after we're done.
Do I have your consent to record this phone call?
Absolutely.
Okay, great.
Otherwise, what would be the point?
I know, exactly. And you live in Santa Fe?
I live in Santa Fe.
Yeah, we talked about that briefly, right? That's where Maria's is there, right? Didn't we talk about that?
Yeah, Maria.
Yes.
Yeah. What an interesting thing for you to know.
Well, I am the road trip king. I love to travel, and I've been through Santa Fe many times, although it's been a few years now. And I remember going to Maria's with my dad and eating, and we just had the best time ever, So.
It's still going strong. But if you come through again, let me know ahead of time, and we can meet, and I'll take you to a local out.
Oh my God, that'd be awesome. I would love to do that because I have not been in a long time. Okay, so anyway, first of all, I just wanted to say thank you so much for joining us. Forrest and I are both going to be talking about your story tonight, but for now, it's just going to be me interviewing you. We found that when both of us are on the phone, the interviewee doesn't usually get a chance to talk very much. So.
Okay.
And then the other thing that I am super pleased to tell you is that you're our very first listener to call in. So that's super exciting because we have
Really?
Yeah, we haven't had that before. In fact, some ungrateful Yahoo left a review for us somewhere. I can't remember where. It just said, all this show is them interviewing their friends. So I was like, but they
well,
have
if you
good
have
stories.
A stable of really interesting friends, why not?
Yeah, exactly. So I'm pleased to report that although we may be, after tonight, we may be friends, prior to tonight, you were a listener of the show that called in with a great story. So we're excited about that. So
yeah, I was listening to the paranormal stories and I thinking, God, that's so incredible! Wow. And then I thought, wait a minute, I've had an experience like that.
That is so cool, and I'm glad that you're cool. But before we get to that, let's talk a little bit. Let's just talk about a little bit who you are. First of all, why don't you introduce yourself?
My name's Richard J. Goldstein. I'm a retired ER physician. I live in New Mexico.
All right. Now,
how's that?
How long have you been retired?
I guess about 8 years.
Okay.
I'd have to add it up.
Wow. So an ER physician. Now, since
I was, yeah.
And you've listened to the show, right? You've heard some of our prior episodes.
I think I've heard every episode.
Okay, so I have to ask you this because I've never in my life had a chance to ask an ER doctor anything when I wasn't bleeding profusely or missing an important item.
Or throwing up.
Yeah, or throwing up. But before I go any further, I just want to say for any of our listeners that haven't heard episode 14, which is called What's Gotten Into You, I'm about to ask our retired ER physician here, Mr. Goldstein, about his take on that. So if you haven't heard episode 14, you might want to skip ahead a little bit and then come back to the story. But did you hear that particular one, episode 14, about?
I did.
Did you have any experience with patients coming into the ER with strange objects in strange orifices?
Lots. In fact, I don't think there's an orifice that hasn't had a strange object in it at one time or another.
Oh my!
So when I was listening to that episode, as soon as he started talking, I knew what it was.
You did.
It's not that uncommon.
So so it happens more than people probably want to admit.
Yeah. In fact, it happened to me once. I once had. Can I say what it is? We're not keeping it secret.
Yeah, sure,
right?
sure.
I myself had a bug in my ear one time, and it is alarming.
Oh my God!
In my case, I felt it go in. It didn't happen while I was sleeping. I felt it go in, and then it was this incredible racket. In addition to hurting, it was incredibly loud.
Oh my God! Were you outside or camping or?
No, actually, I was laying in bed reading.
Oh.
In my case, it was a tiny little bug, like a little gnat-sized fly. I tried the oil trick, and that quieted it down. The next day, I went in and had another doc look at it, and it was gone. So somehow it came out.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, so I guess the most alarming bug that I ever pulled out of an ear was a big moth. I mean, it was, I looked in there and I couldn't tell what I was looking at. It was this big gray mass. I thought, well, it's either a giant bug or his brain is coming out of his face.
Which is, of course, you incorporated that right into your bedside manner, right?
Yeah. Hey, I see your brain. No. Usually when bugs come out of ears, they come out in pieces.
Yeah.
It's hard to pull them out intact. So it's a fairly gross procedure, but people are so happy to have it taken, to have it be gone, that that it's very satisfying for all parties.
Yeah, it's like the thorn in the paw.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so
but other things too, beads and beans, and kids are really fond of sticking little things in their nose or their ear.
Oh yeah.
And there's a variety of handy tools that are made especially for that, to facilitate pulling things out.
Well, and that's what Jerry was trying to describe, that was attached to his head. He had no idea what it was called, but it moved with his head and allowed them to get the tools.
Yeah, that thing I didn't know. I've never heard of.
I tried to Google it because I wanted to name it on the show, and I couldn't find anything.
Yeah, I've never heard of that. But there's these tiny, long, thin forceps that where when you operate the handle, it just opens up a tiny little set of jaws at the very tip.
Okay.
So that you can stick it pretty far down and grab whatever's down there.
That sounds a lot like the construction of the alien in the first Aliens movie.
There you go. Yeah.
It's exactly what you want in your ear.
Less goo, but yeah.
So anyway, before you get started, how long ago did this happen?
Oh, lots of years, maybe 30 years ago.
So it's obviously really poignant. It stuck with you all this time.
Yeah, I mean, I've told the story, a zillion times. I hadn't written it down until very recently in the thing I sent you.
Yes, yeah.
And it stuck with me. I mean, it's the main paranormal experience that I ever had. I mean, I always, I crave those. I wish more would happen. I would love to see an authentic UFO. I want there to be mystery, and I want there to be, mysterious things that, that I brush up against. And this was the chiefest one that I've had.
Well, we feel the same way. We're still waiting for something ultra compelling to happen to both of us, and we've had little things, sure, and yeah, even there was that episode about the experience I had with that psychic and things like that, but I'm still waiting for the irrefutable, undeniable proof that something exists beyond our most basic reality. But
yes, I mean, it seems clear to me that there's a lot we don't know. There's things we don't know how to measure, so we don't measure them, so we don't have some kind of objective proof of their existence. But it's clear to me from the millions of stories that get told that stuff happens.
Well, that's the way I feel, and I also think back to early man and how anything we didn't understand was mystical and unexplained. And for me, and Forrest and I are a little different on this, but for me, the unexplained isn't necessary. It may just be science that we haven't gotten to yet, or something beyond our realm, the realm of our comprehension. It doesn't necessarily mean that it has just a magical supernatural explanation. It just means that we don't quite get it yet. Well, so let's get on to your story. Why don't you tell us what happened?
So this happened about 30 years ago. I was living in a little village just north of Albuquerque, and I used to do a lot of backpacking and camping and so on. And I used to like to go alone a lot. I mean, I went with other people, but I really like backpacking by myself. So I had planned this trip. I had seen a little creek that went up off a road in the Jemez Mountains, which is west of Albuquerque, where I was living. And I thought, that is really pretty. And this is a kind of an arid area, so year-round creeks are a real treat. So I had decided I was going to come back at some point and hike up along this little creek. So I did that. I planned it and I got all ready to do it, but I got a late start. I meant to leave early in the morning, but one thing happened and another thing happened, and so it was
that always
late
happens.
In the afternoon. Yeah, exactly. So I got a late start, and it was already late afternoon, and I had a couple hours of driving to get to the spot. So by the time I got there, it was approaching evening. I mean, it was still light, and the sun wasn't down, but it was approaching evening. And but I thought, I'll hike as far as I can this evening, and I'll camp, and then the next day I'll play around in the creek and follow it up a ways and see how it, see where it goes. And so, but I was in a little bit of a hurry to get walking, so I parked my truck by the creek where the creek, left the road and wound up into the hills. I hadn't filled my water bottle. And I thought, well, maybe I should fill it before I start walking. And then I thought, I'm going to be walking right up next to the creek anyway. It's not hot or anything. So I didn't do that, and that figures into the story later.
Okay. I don't think I would have filled my water bottle either, but I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Black Hawk Down story, or if you read that book or saw that movie. But
I didn't.
Then
of it.
They were in Mogadishu and they got surrounded. But there's the classic line where one of them's like, "Are you taking your night vision goggles?" And the other guy's like, "We won't be out after dark. We don't need them."
Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly.
Not that you're in that situation, but when you're hiking alone, you do have to be careful. But it's like, you're right next to a creek. I can get it anytime I want it.
Yeah, exactly. I have over the years done a lot of hiking and camping in the desert, and I'm always really careful about water.
Right.
But in this case, I thought, hell with it. I'll just fill it when I camp. So anyway, I started walking up the trail, and it was muddy, which stuck in my mind because it hadn't rained that I knew of, but the trail was muddy and a little bit slippery. So I guess I walked about maybe 30 or 40 minutes, and I came to this little meadow. And I thought, this is a pretty spot. And by now it was, really twilight. And I thought, this is probably as far as I should walk, and it's a pretty spot. And the creek's right there, I could hear it. And I thought, cool, I'll camp here. So I walked out into the meadow, and there was a fire ring in the middle of the meadow. And I thought, perfect, other people have camped here. And there was a pile of dry pine branches next to the fire ring, and I thought, well, this is ideal. This is like home. I took my pack off, and I thought, well, while it's still light, I'll get a fire going, and then I'll fill my water bottle, and I'll camp, and it'll be great. But in the fire ring was this glob of wet, greenish-looking stuff that was kind of amorphous. I couldn't really tell what it was. I poked it with a stick, and it smelled kind of like moldy or musty. It didn't smell like, a rotten dead animal or anything like that, or, excrement. It just smelled kind of moldy and musty. But I couldn't move it. So I couldn't use the fire ring. I mean, it kind of was in the center there, and it kind of filled the whole thing. So
it was that big?
So it was like maybe 8 inches across. I mean, it was a blob of stuff,
Right.
But I couldn't really move it. It was too soft. So I ended up building another fire ring next to that one. And then I went to start a fire, and I had a notebook with me, so I took some of the notebook paper and broke up some sticks from this dry pile of firewood and went to light the fire. And I could not get the fire lit. Paper would burn, and the sticks would start to burn, and then it would just go out. And, I mean, I'm good at lighting fires, especially if I have paper and, dry kindling and stuff handy. And I could not get it lit. Every time it would start to burn, it would go back out. And I thought, God, it's almost like something's blowing it out. But there wasn't any wind. I thought, well, that's weird. So by this time I was getting really thirsty. And, I hadn't walked that long. I don't know why I was so thirsty, but I started getting really thirsty. And I thought, well, I'll leave the fire for a minute, and I'll fill my water bottle. At least I'll have some water. So I took the bottle, and it was still, just barely light. And I went down by the creek, which was just right there. And the next thing that happened was I couldn't get to the creek. It was the strangest sensation. There was, a wall of willows or salt cedars, or nettles or something I couldn't get through. So I tried here, and it was too much vegetation. I tried over there, and it was all muddy. I just could not get to the creek. While I was trying, it got darker and darker. And so I thought, well, let me get my flashlight. So, I felt my way back over to where my pack was, got out my flashlight, and went back to the creek. And it was very bizarre. I just couldn't get to the water.
Wow.
Yeah, it was this really strange sensation. I thought, well, I'll go back to the fire. So I went back to the fire and tried to get that going again. And again, I would light some paper and get some sticks burning, and then it would go out. So I thought, well, I'm not going to die of thirst overnight. I'll just take my, I had an apple with me, I remember. So I thought, well, I'll just, I'll eat the apple, I'll get my sleeping bag out, and I'll just, go to sleep. And the minute that I thought of that, I realized I couldn't do that. There was this sense of peril and dread came over me. Oh, I did leave something out. I went back and got my flashlight and went back to the creek and was trying to get to the creek, and I tripped on a root or something and dropped my flashlight, and it broke.
Oh.
I found it, but it wouldn't go on. I couldn't get it to light.
This is like,
so.
It's a textbook opening horror movie scene.
It really was, and that's how I felt, or was beginning to feel. This real sense of dread was coming over me. So anyway, I'm back over by where the fire ring was, and I thought, well, I'll sleep here. And then I thought, I can't sleep here. This is wrong. This is completely wrong. I've got to get out of here. So I packed everything, whatever I had taken out, I stuck back in my pack, and I thought, okay, I'll walk out. But of course, I didn't have my flashlight. What I did have was a box of, strike anywhere matches. So I was able to light a match and find where the trail left the meadow. And so the way I had to proceed was, because the trail was twisty and wound in and out amongst trees and so on. So what I'd have to do is I'd have to light a match and look ahead a few feet and then go as far as I could, and then stop and light another match and look again. I suppose in retrospect that it seemed pitch black to me. And I suppose in retrospect, if I had sat for a little while, my eyes would have become more accustomed to the dark, and maybe I could have, found my way without lighting the matches. But I found myself to be in this gigantic hurry, and I knew I needed to get out. I felt like I was being herded out of that area. And as I proceeded along in the dark, I'd go as far as I could with each match. There started to be noises all around me. There was crackling and swishing of bushes and creaking of trees, and not exactly footsteps, but crunching and munching in the leaves all around me.
So you're standing in the dark with your pack. You've got everything on you now. This is 30 years ago. So you're wearing one of those nightmare big metal frame packs, right?
It was an old Kelty pack.
Oh, cool.
An external frame pack.
Yes, yeah. My dad has those, and I had one for a little while too. So you're standing there in the dark with this, lighting matches over and over, and now you're hearing sounds closing in around you as you're trying to get down. And how far do you have to go?
Well, I had walked about 40 minutes.
Oh, okay.
Going up. I wasn't rushing, but I wasn't strolling because I was concerned to get to a place to camp before it got completely dark.
Right.
On my way up. And the trail, if you'll remember, was muddy and slippery, so I was doing a little bit of slipping and sliding as well. But I didn't want to go too fast. I'd already fallen down once when I broke the flashlight, and the thought of falling down again on the trail was just unbearable. So, and then things started touching me. I could feel things sort of picking against my pack, tapping against my pack. I felt something trailing along my neck and on the back of my head. And the first couple times it happened, I whirled around, but there was nothing to be seen. But more and more, I felt like I was being shown down and hurried along. And I realized that I had ignored several warnings. That place at that time was not for me. By the not being able to light a fire, by not being able to get water, by breaking my flashlight, I had been given all these warnings and I didn't hurry. At one point I shouted, I'm hurrying, I'm going as fast as I can. And that just made it worse. It accelerated this sense of dread and terror that I was having, and the noise was going on and things were plunking against me on my back. So, but I could only go so fast. I would light a match and sort of go as far as I could, maybe a little bit further, and then I would stop and have to light another match. And of course my hands were shaking, so some matches wouldn't light, and however, it seemed like forever, but I probably wasn't any more than 30, 40, 45 minutes to get back down. So then, just when it was getting completely unbearable, I came out from under the trees. There was my truck. I was at the road, and telling the story even now, I get shaky and.
It's giving. I can hear. I'm wearing headphones because I'm monitoring us, and I can hear my own heart pounding in my headphones.
Yeah, it was the most scared I've ever been, without a doubt. Wow. So I came out and I saw my truck, and as soon as I touched the metal of the truck, the steel of the truck, everything stopped. Suddenly it was quiet. I didn't feel anything touching me. The sense of menace kind of evaporated away, and I could hear the creak again. So I threw my pack in the back of the truck and climbed in, and as soon as I got in the truck, there was this sense of insulated peace. Being surrounded by metal and glass just insulated me from it. But of course, I still had this raging thirst, but I was not going to get out of the truck and fill my bottle, in that place. I felt like that would not be the right thing to do. So I started the truck up and drove a couple of miles down the road and found a place where there was a nice turnout, and a little beach sloping down to, from where the trail came to the road. The creek followed along next to the road. So I found a spot to park and went down and filled up my water bottle and just drank it straight out of the creek. This was years ago, but I had halogen tablets with me, that to purify, but I didn't bother with them, and I'm pleased to report that I did not get Giardia. I'm drinking straight out of the creek. Oh. And I unrolled my pad and sleeping bag in the back of the truck and just went to sleep right there by the road. And I laid my sleeping bag and looked up at the sky, and it was dark with a bazillion stars. The way things are when you're away from city lights, and I felt peaceful. I didn't, the dread and menace did not follow me down from that place. So I don't know what it was, but there was a Forest Service sign by the trail, and clearly people had camped there before. It wasn't a remote spot. It was the Jemez Mountains. There's a lot of development and campgrounds and stuff, and so I don't think the spot itself was contained anything in particular, but that particular time, that particular moment, that evening, was just the wrong time to be there. And I've thought a lot about what it could be. Was it ghosts? Was there an old graveyard, like in the movies? Or I just don't know. Or was it a gathering of not necessarily malevolent spirits or creatures, but kind of like that Kipling story where the kid rides his elephant to the gathering of the elephants, that he's not supposed to see, something like that, where
yeah.
I just wasn't supposed to see what was going on or be part of it. Or anyway, that's the story.
One of the questions that Forrest always asks is, did it feel like a male or female presence? Did it feel, and you said you already said not necessarily malevolent. Did it feel like more than one thing or just one thing? Or did it even feel like
it felt like more than one thing.
Okay.
It wasn't a huge, and the noises weren't, it wasn't like a wind blowing, out of the meadow and blowing me down the trail. It was more like I was being followed. Well, herded was what I had always said, that I was being shown the way out, and whatever it was had gotten impatient with me because I wasn't realizing that I shouldn't be there. It's always been my theory about things of that sort is that they don't, this isn't an original thought with me, but I've always felt like those kinds of things can't directly hurt you.
Right.
You know what I mean? They don't interact with us in that way. They can't slit your throat or hit you with a tree, or they can't directly harm you. But what they do is they can fill you with fear or make you do stupid things so that you could end up hurting yourself.
That's exactly what Forrest would say. Forrest has that exact same theory. We call it the rules. He has these rules that he thinks things follow, and that's one of them, is that they can't hurt you directly. Yes,
well, I really agree with that. But I will say that the fear I felt was, fear of harm. Or, I guess fear can be, abstract or something, where it's not, I wasn't thinking, oh man, this thing is going to hit me. It was just this amorphous feeling of fear that made me rush. I guess if the terrain had been dangerous, I suppose I could have stumbled off of something, fallen or something, and hurt myself.
Well, it was dangerous, but you were careful. With the mud, you could have twisted an ankle pretty easy.
That's true, and then I would have had a hard time leaving.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what that. Of course, what if I had stood my ground? I've always wondered that.
Yeah.
It wasn't possible to stand my ground, and I couldn't do when I started to take out my sleeping bag and I'll just sleep and eat my apple and get water in the morning and deal with. I don't need a fire. It wasn't it was summer. It wasn't cold. When I thought that, there just was no question in my mind that was not possible.
Wow. Well,
I don't know. I don't know how do they get into your emotion is the question, or a question.
Yeah, there's a connection. There's a connection there that, again, goes back to what we were talking about earlier. It sort of transcends our understanding.
I've only had that one experience that was like that. There's been times when I've, been out in the dark. I guess we've all, and had chills go up our back, and, we look around, and this was the most direct and personal experience of that sort that I've had. And I never have been able to figure out, how does it work? How does something, assuming there is something that's, independent of your own built-in fears, how does it get to you? What buttons does it press? How does it work?
I think it has. I have no idea. So I should qualify that.
Yeah.
I have no idea.
It was sort of a rhetorical question.
Yeah, no, it is. And I obviously don't have the answer, but, I guess for me personally, I think that there's things that we don't understand about our own existence and how it works that are more complicated than just simply what you can see in front of you. And I think that when you can cross paths with other things that exist on planes that we don't realize we exist on, I guess is the best way I can think to say it.
My other question, or I guess almost fear that I have, is that I passed up an opportunity to go past the wrathful demon to get to the the paradise on the other side.
Well,
of it.
This is a weird parallel, and it's from a TV show, so I don't know how much value it has in it. But Les Stroud, do you know who Les Stroud is?
The name.
He's a survivalist. Yeah, it's like him and Bear Grylls. They're the two guys that are always just like they're being dropped off in the middle of nowhere and have to eat berries.
Right.
And he's doing a series right now on Bigfoot, and which I like him am on the fence about Bigfoot. I love Bigfoot stories, like we love all stories. That's why we have Astonishing Legends. But I'm not sure. And I've heard some pretty amazing ones over the years, and we're gonna tackle it sooner or later on our show. But he's doing a series right now, and I was watching one the other day, and he had gone up to in the Pacific Northwest somewhere, up to a very high mountain, and they set up one of those game cameras and put some apples on a tree and some other stuff, and they were going to just see what happened. And then it was him and this other guy who was an expert who had said he'd had an encounter there years before. Les himself was incredulous about this expert, but the good news about the guy was that he was okay with them being incredulous with each other, and they were friends. So they had gone up there to sort of see if they could find anything. They set this stuff up, and they went up to camp a couple hundred yards above it, so they wouldn't be near where the cameras and the sort of bait was. And they couldn't, like you, and this I actually thought of you when I watched this, and I was thinking, oh, I'm glad I'm talking to you in a few days, because they couldn't get their fire started. And they just tried everything. So, and it was Les, and he, first of all, is one of the foremost survivalists in the country. This guy can start a fire with like a shoestring. And then, and then he was up there also with I think a local Native American who was freaking out a little bit as well. And then they were there with the other guy who was considered a sort of a Sasquatch expert or a Bigfoot expert, and all outdoorsmen. None of them could get this fire started. They were trying everything, and everything was soaking wet, and they were having all these issues. And Les actually used his second to last match, I think. And they were about to give up. They were like, we're gonna be camping in the wet. We're gonna be wet all night. And during the time that this was happening, there was a tree near them that they heard sounds coming out of, like knocking sounds.
Like out of the inside of the tree?
Inside of the tree. The other two guys couldn't pin it down as being inside the tree, but he went down. He was like, normally I would not go do this. My instinct is telling me to go away, but I'm up here to get any kind of evidence about anything because, frankly, I'm not going to believe in this until I see something. And so he's like, I'm going to go figure out what this sound is. So he goes down to where they're hearing the sound, and he pinpoints it to the inside of a tree. He goes right up to it, and he can hear it, and he knocks on the tree, and he realizes that it sounds hollow compared to the other trees around it. But he still can't figure out what it is. He goes back up to where they're trying to start the fire, and they're still having issues, and the whole time that knocking sound is coming from that tree. And he said, it's not a tree creaking in the wind. He goes, we all know what that sounds like. There was something weird going on with it, but we couldn't see what was hitting it. So they were just about to give up. And it was very much like your scenario. Everything they were trying was not working for them. And they were just about to give up. And at that moment, there was a groan, and a huge tree, another tree, fell over, like very close to them. And when it did, it exposed a ton of dry wood inside of it. And the Native American that was with them was like, we were tested, and we were allowed to stay.
Wow.
And they took that wood out and made a big fire, and with their last match. And I may have some of these details wrong. I saw it a few days ago, so I'm not vouching for exactly, but that's pretty close to what happened. The show's still on the air. You can probably find it if you DVR the reruns. Yeah,
now that makes me wonder if I missed something.
Well, I don't know. I got to tell you, I would have gotten the hell out of there.
That's what I did.
I mean, that's like, I don't know if you heard the Greyfriars Kirkyard episode. That was our Halloween special last year. And
I did, yeah.
And I was telling Forrest, it's like, as badly as I want to experience something, I'm not going there. Like, it gets to a point where there's like, I don't know, because I'm like, well, you could come away from an experience like that with some sort of premature death, cancer or something, like it's too, like you said, they can't directly hurt you, but I do believe that when you encounter something really malevolent, it can make you sick. It's like the haunting in Connecticut. People are in the presence of bad things long enough to get seriously ill, or the illnesses they already have get worse, and then when they move away from the area or they get away from it, they get better. So I do believe in those influences, or whether I do or not, I don't want to expose myself to just even the idea that they might exist. And I mean, you're a doctor.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know where you come down on that, but
I come down thinking that illness, even sort of obvious illness like infections, I think are always an interplay between external forces of some sort, whether it's microbes or radiation or whatever it is, and inner forces, maybe some kind of interior receptivity to something.
Right.
I think, because, clearly just being in the presence of a pathogenic microbe doesn't automatically mean you're going to get the disease that it causes. I think, so I think it's a complex interaction between ourselves and, and our environment. And I guess paranormal experiences could work in something of the same way. It's interesting that with that Sasquatch story that there's two different things going on there. I mean, there was this paranormal testing that went on that the Native American guy recognized. But Sasquatch is a completely different issue.
Yes.
That's the issue of, what something we would recognize as a creature, an animal of some sort.
Well, you say that, but there are people that believe that it has supernatural abilities, or that it's interdimensional, or that it exists on multiple planes. There are people that have a whole thing that goes way outside of just cryptozoological deal with Sasquatch.
Is that true of all the...
That is true of most of them. And
Sasquatch, or
yes.
What's the one in Tibet? The abominable snowman?
Yeah, the Yeti, the Sasquatch, the skunk ape, the what's the other one? I can't name them all right now, but there's so many of them. And the other thing that happened on that episode of that show was they came back down to check the game camera. The first night they went to check it, it had been knocked over. And they played it back, and like some little critter had knocked it over. And all their bait was gone, including an apple that was like 20 feet up in a tree and speared on a branch. But they couldn't see anything because the little animal, whatever it was, I can't remember, it was about the size of a squirrel, knocked the camera over. They set it back up the next night, and Les himself was like, well, maybe the other guy is hoaxing me. I don't know. Maybe he got up in the middle of the night and went down there. But that next night, that guy left. He hiked all the way down off the mountain. And they put the camera back up, and in the morning when they came down, the camera was intact, and it had, I think, 9 images on it. And the apple and all the bait, including chocolate candy bars, laid out on these branches that were so high up they had stood on each other's shoulders to place them, were all gone. So obviously lots of different animals would be attracted to that stuff, but they rolled back the camera. And in the camera, he saw something coming up in the very lower left of the frame. You could just barely see the top of it, and then the apple vanished. Literally like an old-timey poof vanished off the branch. So something was able to take it without triggering the motion sensor for that particular instant, as well as all the candy bars without triggering the motion sensor. And then
that raises...
in the very bottom left, he was like, I can see the top of something here. And whatever that was is what took the bait, but we don't know what it is. You can only see like a couple inches of the top, whether it's the head or an arm or a shoulder of something that you can't even make it out. But there is something in this one frame. Whatever it was managed to take everything without the camera catching it. Oh, and he said the other point was that whatever is in the bottom frame of that shot is at least 8 feet tall or something like that. So,
well, that just raises all sorts of questions about what kind of interfaces are going on here. Another one of my cherished beliefs is that, there are wild animals that have figured out how to live amongst us in our cities and so on. I mean, flies and rats and groundhogs and
roaches and June bugs.
Yeah, all sorts of insects, but larger things too. And I've always wondered if there are, like that movie Wolfen, where there's wolves that have learned to live amongst us. I've always wondered about stuff like that. If there are fairly large creatures that exist in our cities, but are so good at hiding or just being disguised as things that we don't recognize them. I mean, we've been around a long time, and we've had cities for a long time. I would think things could have evolved.
And there was also that movie Chud, cannibalistic humanoid underground dwellers. They all lived in the sewers.
Yeah, I don't know that one, but that's exactly the kind of thing I'm talking about. Not to go too far afield.
No, thank you. Thank you so much. It's been so great talking to you.
Yeah, this was really fun.
Thanks for talking to me so late in the evening.
Great. Thanks, Scott.
Take care.
Wow, that's pretty creepy.
Yeah, that story gives me the chills, honestly.
You know what? But this brings up an interesting point, because when I first read the story that he'd emailed and then listened to what you had recorded with him, I was thinking about all of my own experiences out in the woods. I grew up in the Northwest, in a suburban setting, but certainly there was a lot of camping, a lot of fishing and hiking and all that out in the woods. And the woods have never given me a creepy feeling. I mean, I've always felt like comforted because it was nature. You know what I'm saying? I mean, of course, there's animals that you got to be wary of. Certainly bear, possibly a cougar. But that's about it. I've always felt safe, I guess. I mean, it's a thing you have to respect, because you can get trapped, you can get injured, not make your way out, die of dehydration and hunger, hypothermia. There's definite things to be respectful of.
It's kind of crazy, though, when you think about it. When you think about the message that was being sent to him, and then the further evidence of during his descent, of the sounds around him and the physical contact. I mean, that's when it really – and when he said, I'm going as fast as I can, and then it got worse.
Yeah, you think it would get better. Like, all right, I just want to make sure that you understood us and that you need to get the heck out of here. But that's not an uncommon thing. I've recently heard lots of stories about people hearing things in the bushes near them as they're walking, crunching things, not animals. I mean, sometimes, I've walked by the ice plant, when I'm out for a walk, and I can hear rats or squirrels or whatever they are scurrying about in the bushes.
Yes.
But that does not instill deep fear and a sense that I have to flee immediately.
Right. It's a whole different story.
Now, has that ever happened to you?
One time when I was younger, there was some land near the house that I lived in Raleigh, North Carolina, that was undeveloped for whatever reason. And on this land was a radio tower that had been either disassembled or had fallen over, or maybe never erected. I'm not sure. It had one of those big metal reflectors that I guess when the tower...
the array? You mean the...
Well, it was it was just a piece of metal, but I think it was designed to bounce something.
Okay.
If the tower had been standing upright, it would have been at a 45-degree angle. You've seen them. I don't know what they do. But
I know what you're talking about.
All this stuff was on the ground in the woods, and it was a great place to go play. And so I had a neighbor friend of mine. He and I would go there sometimes and play on this structure. And we were out there one day. It was broad daylight. And it was a pretty big piece of land. There was no houses around at the time. I'm sure it's all developed at this point, but because it was in North Raleigh. And we became convinced that something was watching us. And
how did that? What gave you that feeling?
I can't remember. We just got, it's not a very interesting story, so I'm not going to drag it out. But we got kind of creeped out, and we wound up running away and trying to run out of there. And we were both convinced, myself especially, that something was chasing us, that was upright and running after us, whether it was a man or an animal or whatever. And as I was running for life, like in a full state of panic, I knew this thing was behind me. But I also knew that I thought I was maybe imagining it, that I had spooked myself, but I wasn't going to stop and check.
Right.
And we ran all the way home, went our separate ways.
Wait a minute. You, without speaking, you just darted
back into
your
our
own homes.
Respective homes. I went into my house, and I had a little TV in my bedroom. It was the first thing I ever bought with my own money from like a part-time job, little Samsung TV actually. was like $300.
Was it a distinct color like burnt orange?
Just a little tiny, not
a 70s,
wood
no,
grained,
70s. Yeah, okay,
color,
gotcha.
TV. And I remember that I turned it on. I was just sitting on the floor looking at it, trying to catch my breath. And I was like, did something happen or not or whatever? And the TV turned off while I was looking at it.
By itself?
Yeah, it turned off by itself. And I was like, that point I was like, what is happening?
Yeah.
But then even the next day I was like, no, I imagined everything.
Yeah.
I don't know. And it has nothing to do with Dr. Goldstein's story really, because it was not real. And even right after it happened, it didn't feel real. It just was what I could relate to was that abject terror. Yeah. Now, as I got older, I was in the Boy Scouts actually for a long time, but all the way to Eagle Scout, believe it or not.
Yeah.
And I've done
congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
I went to the ceremony last week.
Right. But I of course did a lot of camping and never got creeped out by anything. I woke up one night in my tent. There was a raccoon, maybe 6 inches from my face, unwrapping a Snickers bar that my tent mate had left.
Oh, yeah.
And these tents were like on pallets. The canvas, big tent, like you have, and like old timey. Civil War tent,
Right.
And so there was a little table between our two cots, and there was a Snickers bar that my bunkmate had left out.
Yeah, you never want to do that.
No, and I look over, and the raccoon is looking at me like, what are you going to do?
Yeah, I know.
As he's looking me in the eye, and slowly with his little raccoon hands unwrapping the Snickers bar. And
no, it's amazing how brazen they are. And because that's the only thing that's creepy about them is that they don't care.
No,
they're not scared of you.
Right.
We have them here in Los Angeles. Actually, you had one in your
yard.
That's right.
Yeah.
You mentioned that one was digging for grubs in your backyard.
Yeah, it was the size of a pot-bellied pig too.
They eat well. They don't miss many meals, especially a candy bar.
Yeah. Well, anyway.
But that's your point, is that even when there's a wild beast sitting in your tent with you, that's a different feeling. I mean, I'm sure there was alarm. There's the fact of being startled. But this is another point I was going to make. And again, I love this aspect of these types of stories when people tell them, because you can tell they're genuinely affected. I mean, we've had several people come into the studio here to tell, which you've heard, stories. And when we pause, they're like, I'm sorry, but this freaks me out.
Right.
Retelling it. I mean, they get goosebumps. The hair stand up on the back of their neck.
It's true.
It was the same thing with Dr. Goldstein. When he was retelling the story, he paused to say, boy, sorry, I'm kind of nervous. This creeps me out a little, retelling the story, because you have those same feelings. But that's the point we're making, is that is different from when you freak yourself out, or maybe you saw something that was scary. I've seen live bear stand up, maybe it was 8 feet tall, and that certainly gets your attention. And it gives you that primal fight or flight response, but it's not abject terror.
Right.
It's not terror from beyond.
Yeah, it's a different thing. And it's hard. I can't really say what this was. I mean, it's hard for me to even speculate what he experienced. Now, let me tell you something. One of the things that I'm most fascinated about with his story is the green stuff in the fire.
Oh, why it wouldn't light.
What is that? Well, yeah, it's not only that it wouldn't light. He couldn't even use the fire ring because there was a large blob of green goo in the fire ring. Now, I'm trying to figure out what is naturally occurring that would create this substance. And he said it smelled too, So but he said not like a dead animal. He said, but it did have a smell to it. He's like, I could not use that fire ring. And I'm looking everywhere. What is this? I look up green goo. Turns out
that's just a general term you can put in, and stuff comes up.
Yeah, praise Google. There is actually a product on Amazon called green goo.
Yeah, yeah.
It's some kind of. It's described as 100% all natural green goo, first aid and outdoor salve.
Okay, so it's a medicinal balm.
Yeah, it's some kind
unguent.
of but it comes in a little container. It's like 3 ounces.
Yeah,
and I'm sure it doesn't smell bad.
I'm sure it's been engineered to be consumer friendly. It's not going to stink. It may not light on fire, hopefully, but I know what you're talking about.
But also, I highly doubt it was around 30 years ago.
Yeah,
it's a very hipster looking product.
No, that reminds me of the stuff called slime that's green. You can use it to seal your bike tires or your car tires from puncture, and it works really well. But again, this is not what that was. Actually, you know what? From the links that you sent me, what it sounds like is more like an algae type.
Well, there is this stuff, and people talk about this, especially in 14 circles. There's this thing that they call star jelly.
Oh, yeah.
Which you can actually look that up on Wikipedia. Star jelly is just any sort of strange gelatinous stuff that you find, and it comes in all different colors. And there's been lots of people that have discovered it under various circumstances. Some people have said it's rained from the sky. Other people, it turns up in strange places at strange times. And there's actually even – there was an unsolved mysteries about it. In 1994, a gelatinous rain fell in Washington in a town called Oakville. Do you know where that is? Oakville?
Well, no, that's not my side of the state, but I've heard of it. It's it's a little south of Olympia, and like north of Centralia, which is not going to mean anything to anybody.
Well, apparently this gelatinous rain fell, and Unsolved Mysteries even did a show on it, which I vaguely feel like I've seen in 1995. I guess there was also a National Geographic video called Mystery Goo Rain.
No, they take the turn of conspiracy.
Yeah, they put forward a conspiracy theory that had an interview with a microbiologist named Mike McDowell, who said he tested the substance and speculated that it was a matrix containing Pseudomonas fluorescens and Enterobacter cloacae that could cause illness to those who touched it. So, and in this video, he claims that his sample went missing, and when he asked the management what happened to it, he was told, "Don't ask." So, apparently, yeah. So he's on record as saying he thinks the material was manufactured by somebody, and that Oakville was chosen as a test site.
Well, you never know. Well, first there's Hanford. Okay, so that's kind of a mysterious. It's not mysterious, but there's a lot of high security down in that corner of the state, as well as the place where they incinerate nerve gas. And store it. VX, all your good juicy ones. That's a military installation, though. It's a storage facility, I believe, and they also incinerate them there for disposal.
Oh, wow.
So, Washington State's not without its mystery.
Talk about not in my backyard.
Well, North Carolina, too.
Yeah.
And now Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
This is one quick aspect I was going to mention, is that every state has its mystery, and especially, New Mexico, it's the land of enchantment. That's their motto.
It's an amazing state. I love it there. But the only other thing I was going to say is, so then I'm like trying to unfold what scenario, how did this goo get into the fireplace? Forget the whole rest of the story.
Right.
What is this? All right. Now, everyone knows when you go camping and you have a fire, especially when you're younger, you're always throwing things in to see what happens when they burn. Right. Everyone's got a little pyromania in them.
There's going to be burnt bottle caps and a half-melted Coke bottle in there.
What if somebody threw something in there and this is what it turned into? But he didn't describe it as being burnt at all. And the other thing that it could be is a bacteria called nostoc. Nostoc apparently forms itself into colonies that are composed of filaments and moniliform cells in a gelatinous sheath. Okay, and I'm taking that from Wikipedia. So when it's on the ground, a nostoc colony is ordinarily not seen, but after a rain, it swells up into a conspicuous jelly-like mass, which was once thought to have fallen from the sky. Hence the popular names star jelly, troll's butter, witch's butter, not to be confused.
Yeah, that's not the stuff that now people are putting on for dry skin. That's the bag balm. Excuse me. That's
witch's butter and witch's jelly. So Michael Quinion of the Worldwide Words newsletter said that it is known in Welsh as Pwdr Se, rot of the stars. It is also known as Pided Ser, star slime. So this is this stuff that, and this is one of the most plausible things that comes up for me, is like that there was some sort of mold in the fire ring. Maybe it rained just before Rick got there, and it swelled up out of the ground, and it was a naturally occurring thing that was reacting to, maybe there was some food left in the fire and this mold grew. The other thing is close by, really close by, not too far away, Los Alamos, right?
Yeah. No. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, and I don't know, again, there was a connection. It wasn't really a connection I was trying to make earlier, but you're not too far from Fat Man and Little Boy, the World War II.
Where Oppenheimer ran
exactly.
Los Alamos. So maybe a couple of guys stole some of the latest product out of there and went camping, right?
I don't. No, it sounds, if you're going to remove the paranormal element to that, could be an algae of some kind, a bacteria, or it sounds like it could have a biological explanation to it. But he's an experienced camper, and as he said, started fires in all different kinds of conditions. Just needs a few twigs and some matches, and he's ready to go. But this seemed different to him.
He's also has medical expertise and awareness of biological entities. You know,
well, that's what I'm saying. He's aware of science and and the principles of physics and science and chemistry. Right. He had to study all that in school.
And he didn't go on about it a long time. He basically just said, I couldn't light a fire there.
It just adds to the weirdness of the story.
Yes.
One more element of something unexplainable.
The western segment of the Santa Fe National Forest, known as either Jemez Mountain or simply Jemez, offers some of the most spectacular geology found in the area. Once upon a time, this area experienced several explosive volcanic events, but evidence of other geological forces can be seen in this section of the Santa Fe National Forest. Anyway, it sounds like a beautiful place. And then he mentioned Fenton Lake. So Fenton Lake State Park, I guess, is a 37-acre lake. And it's a very popular fishing destination. And
it looks lovely. We'll have links to these locations on the website.
Yes.
So you can kind of see what we're talking about. They're not too far from Santa Fe, where he was living at the time. So it's kind of a quick drive. No, not quick. Like an hour and a half, I would guess.
It's north. It's mostly north and a little west of Albuquerque.
Right. But it's all kind of the same area. So Santa Fe, of course, is north of Albuquerque. If you keep going further north, you'll hit the White Sands Missile Range, and then head west, and you'll see the general area of the Jemez Mountains with Fenton Lake. And then if you keep going further west, you'll eventually get to the Chaco Canyon area. Now, you've been there, right?
Yes, I have. I went to Chaco Canyon as a kid with my dad. We went to every park over the course of several years.
Yeah.
On road trips with his four-wheel drive, usually.
Did you do any hiking?
We did a ton of hiking.
But you didn't have this experience, which I'd read from a webpage called shadowlands.net. And they had a great listing of all the haunted sites in New Mexico, which I kind of found, and didn't see anything very specific to Fenton Lake, but definitely Chaco Canyon, where it says, while hiking, you can feel the presence of someone with you, following you.
Chaco Canyon, I believe, I don't know if it still has this distinction, but it is the largest site of ancient Native American ruins or Hopi Indian, and I don't want to be quoted on this. The fact checkers get mad, but I feel like there's many pueblos there.
Oh yeah, well that's exactly that's what he was talking about.
I mean, I was a kid when I went, but I remember being in awe of all the structures that were out there in the desert, and you can just hike and hike and hike. And in addition to that, back when we went when I was younger, I mean, this was, I don't know, probably 30 years ago, but it's probably about the same time.
Yeah.
Rick was camping close by, but they were still finding stuff regularly that had not been discovered.
Oh, yeah. He had also mentioned there's an old Pueblo area in the Jemez Mountains. So the area is really rich with Native American lore and old dwellings and establishments. And I believe maybe the Chaco Canyon area, that could be as old as 1500 BC.
Yeah.
So it's definitely lots of living going on there, lots of history.
A lot of history, and a lot of history in general throughout that whole area. And, it's funny, I was looking into campgrounds and hauntings at campgrounds. Apparently, the only allegedly haunted campground in the entire Forest Service, there's one.
Well, by whose opinion? The Forest Service?
They list it as haunted on their website. So
okay.
I guess there's a scary story behind it. It's called the Holy Ghost Campground. And I guess it's near Holy Ghost Canyon, and it's haunted by the spirit of a priest, supposedly.
Yeah.
It's haunted by the spirit of a priest who had been killed by Pueblo people in the late 1680s. And this is really not far from where Rick was when he was camping.
Right. But really, the whole Southwest, there's traditionally been a lot of mystery and natural, spiritual kind of energy, I guess. A lot of people claim that. And they go to Sedona, Arizona to kind of pick up on those vibes in the Anasazi ruins. So the whole area, really, a lot of lore. They've been inhabited for thousands of years, by native peoples. And also, like you said about the ghost campground, that's pretty early for the West, the late 17th century.
It is. It's pretty amazing. And it's one of my favorite parts of the country. And the other thing that Rick said about this particular campground that I thought was really interesting was that it didn't necessarily feel like it was associated with that place. It just was that place at that time.
Yeah,
it's like he was colliding with something.
Exactly.
And I love that he kept saying the word herd, like he was herded out, which is
You're like,
condescending.
he was he was prodded. Definitely something said, time to get going. This is not for you.
He also felt like it was more than one thing. Like it was a group of entities or something.
Well, it reminded me of people having these kinds of experiences out on walks, even on the way home. It could be a dark evening. I remember this one story. This couple said that they heard a little scurrying, and it didn't seem like animals. They didn't have that sense. But what was weird is that they felt this beckoning, like, come follow us kind of a thing. And that's the old leprechaun, legend and lore.
Right.
People get misled off into the woods, never to be seen again.
That goes all the way back to the sirens.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. Yeah. And so if people, and again, who knows? I don't know if these are totally true. These people, when they're telling the story, I go by how nervous and freaked out they seem. Either they're really good actors or they're genuinely still freaked out about it. And what's luring them away? And in this case, he was lucky because they were telling him to go away, not follow us off into the woods.
Well, and additionally, he was able to go and sleep in his truck just a short distance away where everything felt okay.
Yeah, that's another thing that I think I've mentioned previously when people tell a horrible ghost encounter or something very spooky or weird, wakes them up in the middle of the night, be it a shadow person or the old hag at the end of the bed. Right after that, they go to sleep, which I can't. But I know what he was talking about. As soon as he got to the truck and can feel the protection of metal and glass and in the cab of the pickup, he felt fine.
Yeah,
and back at ease. Plus, to him, he was out of danger, and to whatever was prodding him, he was out of the way.
Right. Well, it was a great story. I'd like to thank Richard Goldstein again for calling in and sharing his story with us. If any of you listeners out there have stories like that you want to share, that you think might be good for the show, give us a call. Reach out to us or email us or however you want. Or if you get our app, apparently you can call me directly from our app.
He's probably not going to pick up, but we do get the message.
Yes, we do. That's going to wrap it up for our show. We just wanted to let you know, if you go to our website for this episode, you will find the story that Mr. Goldstein wrote about this event, which he said that we could feel free to put up there. So that's up there. We're going to have some pictures of the area where Fenton Lake is. He sent in a picture of him with that pack, with his sons in the picture too. So that's great. And I'm still looking for a picture of a truck like the one he had. It was a Slant 6 Forest Service truck,
oh, no. Right.
which sounds really cool. So you can find all that stuff on our website.
Thanks for listening. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another show. Probably not about the Coral Castle.
Remember to go to the App Store or Google Play and look for our app. It's the easiest way to keep up with our show. Our theme was composed by Judson Crane and our sound design by Ryan McCullough. Thanks to Jim Creative Design for our logo.
Most importantly, we want to thank our listeners. You can find us online at astonishinglegends.com, as well as Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, and Google+.
Copyright Scott Philbrook
and Forrest Burgess. Good night.